My name is Paul O'Kane. I'm a member of the Scottish Parliament for West Scotland, and it is my pleasure to be hosting this event this evening on behalf of the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust and partners. And I'd like to thank them for the vital work that they do, not just at this time of year around Holocaust Memorial Day, but indeed year-round, along with all of the partners that you will see this evening, to ensure that Holocaust and genocide education and remembrance is kept alive all year round. This year, as in past years, we come together to commemorate and reflect on the horrific genocide and oppression of Jews and other groups during the Holocaust, and indeed the victims of other genocides in the decades since in Darfur, Rwanda, Cambodia and Bosnia. It remains now, as ever, incredibly important to come together to pause, reflect and remember those 6 million Jewish people murdered by the Nazis, alongside millions of others, including Roma and Sinti people, disabled people and LGBT people. And we call to mind the millions of others who lived through and survived the Holocaust, but who lost everything: family, dignity, health and home. And it is important that we gather this evening in the Scottish Parliament, the representative body of the people of Scotland, to demonstrate that our commitment to tackling anti-Semitism, hate, racism, oppression and genocide are a mission for all of us. It was a privilege to sponsor and lead the debate in the chamber of the Scottish Parliament just up the stairs behind me last week to mark Holocaust Memorial Day. And I'm always pleased to see the collegiate nature of Holocaust remembrance and commemoration in this Parliament, and I really do want to thank colleagues from across all the political parties for their contributions to that. I want to pay tribute to all of my fellow MSPs who join us here this evening, many of whom I know have constituents who are participating in our ceremonies, or indeed who are here to commemorate loved ones who died in the Holocaust, or indeed who are related to survivors, so you are very welcome. I'm also delighted that we are joined this evening by the First Minister, Humza Yousaf, and the Minister for Community Safety, Siobhan Brown, and indeed the presiding officer of the Scottish Parliament, Alison Johnson. I think what struck me most in the debate last week was the engagement with this year's theme for Holocaust Memorial Day, which is the fragility of freedom. We know that the systematic violence and mass murder carried out in the concentration camps across Nazi-occupied Europe, which is often the first thought we have when we think of the Holocaust, is not where it all began. Because genocide does not just happen. It's preceded by a series of events to demonise groups, to stir up division and hatred in society, and to bit by bit remove freedom to prevent them from fighting back. And we know that was the playbook deployed by the Nazis in taking the rights of Jews to work where they wanted, to live where they wanted, to access leisure, sport and education, and ultimately to have the life that they wanted to lead. And for those that did survive and those who have been born after, I think it is important to remember that just because atrocities stop and society begins to normalise, freedom doesn't always return fully. People go on living with the memory of what was experienced and have a lack of trust perhaps in their freedoms, and that their freedoms really are secure. And all too frequently, they have to go on living in a modern day experience, experiencing anti-Semitism and other forms of hate. And that is a concern and experience that I hear all too frequently from Jewish people in my community in East Renfrewshire. So tonight, I think we will hear more on that fragility of freedom, what more we can all do to recommit ourselves to preventing it from causing and breaking the freedom that we all enjoy, and to know what we can do to provide reassurance to all communities and work to combat anti-Semitism, racism and hatred throughout all of society. So I'm very glad that everyone has been able to join us. I do hope that you will participate fully in this evening's commemoration. On a very practical note, there are no fire alarms planned in the Scottish Parliament this evening, so if the alarm does sound, please follow the directions of the event staff. And I would now like to pass over to the Chief Executive of the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust, Olivia Marks-Waldman, for a few remarks. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Paul, and for your sponsorship and support of this event in this most prestigious of places. And thank you, everybody. On this day, we remember the 6 million Jewish people murdered during the Holocaust, alongside the millions of non-Jewish people murdered under the Nazis' persecution of other communities. And we honor and remember millions more murdered in more recent genocides in Cambodia, Rwanda, Bosnia, Darfur. Holding the National Scottish Commemoration in Parliament, the heart of Scottish democracy, is significant. It serves as a reminder of the power of this place to make change for good in aid of a safer future for all. I'd like to pay tribute to all members of the Scottish Parliament who spoke in last week's Holocaust Memorial Day debate and who continue to champion Holocaust Memorial Day in their constituencies. Your leadership sends a powerful message, a message to survivors of the Holocaust and of genocides that their experiences are honoured, and a powerful message to those who still deny or distort the history that we commemorate, that their false views hold no place in modern Scotland. As Paul has said, one of the responsibilities of us at Holocaust Memorial Day Trust is to develop a theme each year. And the theme this year is the fragility of freedom. In every genocide that has taken place, those who are targeted for persecution have had their freedoms restricted. Freedom to an education, freedom of movement, freedom of worship, even freedom to live. And this Holocaust Memorial Day, we can all reflect on how freedoms need to be valued and cherished, and how many people around the world face restrictions to their freedoms to live, worship, work, or love freely. On Holocaust Memorial Day this year, 2024, we mark the 30th anniversary of the genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda. We can also remember how conflict is still ongoing in the Darfur region of Sudan. This year, we can all reflect on how freedom is fragile and vulnerable to abuse. As we come together in communities around Scotland and around the UK, let's all pledge not to take freedoms for granted. As the conflict in Israel and Gaza continues, the impact here has been rising community tensions. Across the UK, we have seen widespread and appalling anti-Semitism, anti-Jewish hatred. And we've seen a shocking and deeply concerning rise in anti-Muslim hatred. At the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust, we know that everyone who joins a Holocaust Memorial Day event learns more about the past and increases empathy and understanding with others today. And we all go on to take action for a better future. So it gives me enormous pleasure, it's a great privilege to be here with you, and especially to welcome the First Minister of Scotland, Right Honourable Humza Yousaf MSP, to give his address. Thank you.
A girl with dark plaited hair and a floral dress stands smiling, looking into the camera. It looks like a sunny day. Behind her, another girl, probably her sister, stands on the rung of a fence that they're both leaning on, and she's clutching her smiling companion's shoulder. These two girls look like my daughters on a sunny day. A woman laughs in her husband's arms, cheek to cheek. Three brothers standing together in what looks like matching shirts. Just some of the many family photographs of Jewish life in Europe before the Second World War, held by the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. A reminder, as if we ever needed it, that those killed in the Holocaust are not a number nor a statistic, but a human being, a mother, a father, a son, a daughter, grandchildren, grandparents, killed because hatred went unchecked. Anti-Semitism existed long before the Holocaust, but we failed to grasp it. We failed to grasp the creep of prejudice, the fragility of freedom, and it led to the unthinkable, unimaginable purge of human life. Friends, it is genuinely an honour to be here. It is an immensely powerful day. I've been to many Holocaust Memorial Day events over the years, but having attended many doesn't diminish the power and the impact of the reflections that we'll hear today. Can I thank Paul O'Kane for, of course, sponsoring today's event? Can I thank all of the MSPs, and I can see MSPs from, I think, virtually every single political party in the Scottish Parliament represented here, because although we will spend time in here often kicking lumps out of each other up the stairs in the chamber over there, actually when it comes to the issues like this that really shouldn't cause any division whatsoever, then we are united in standing up against hatred. So I want to thank all of my MSP colleagues from all the political parties for taking the time this evening. Can I thank, of course, Olivia, Kirsty as well, and to the whole team at Holocaust Memorial Day Trust, not just for today, but for what you do throughout the course of the entire year. And can I thank you all for joining us, for being here to, most importantly, to bear witness to the testimony and to reflect. And let me try to put some of what we witnessed, what many witnessed, and indeed we'll hear from some survivors, into some context. The Weimar Republic, so Germany's government from 1913 to 1933, was a democracy, albeit an imperfect one. The Republic had a constitution. It had a Bill of Rights that guaranteed every German citizen equality, and all Germans could vote in elections from the age of 20. But Article 48 of the Weimar Constitution gave the German president the power to act without parliamentary approval in times of a national emergency. It was that very precedent that Adolf Hitler used and would rely on to become a tyrannical leader without limitations or without restraint. A reminder that prejudice knows no boundaries, knows no faith, it doesn't respect democracy, doesn't respect a Bill of Rights. It can find its way into every and any society. It's easy to forget that amongst the harassment and the outright violence and property destruction which Hitler and his followers inflicted on those they persecuted, there was another deadly weapon at play. The weapon of words, the weapon of propaganda, of misinformation and disinformation, designed for one purpose: to desensitize German citizens to the torment of their friends, of their neighbours, of their doctors, of their teachers. And here then lies a lesson for all of us, but perhaps particularly for those of us who are in politics, that we must never, ever lose our empathy for the other, particularly for those who are the most vulnerable in our society. Among German Nobel Prize winners up to 1938, around a quarter were Jewish. Jewish people contributed to every single aspect of German cultural, political, and public life. 100,000 Jewish people fought for the German army during World War I. 12,000 of them gave up their lives, lost their lives, paid the ultimate sacrifice, as we describe it, for the German army. The first draft of the Weimar Republic's constitution was written by a Jewish lawyer. But in Nazi propaganda, Jews were to blame for every single misfortune that Germany had experienced since World War I. And they were deliberately depicted as immoral, as subhuman, as malevolent. In frantic speeches, Nazi leaders called for the systematic removal of Jews from society. In laws and regulations, Jews who had seen their rights restricted in Europe for centuries were cruelly ostracized, required to stitch a yellow star on their clothing. From 1933 to 1939, more than 400 decrees and regulations restricted every and all aspects of Jewish life in Germany. These decrees, these regulations, monitored and enforced by civil servants and other officials taking part in a so-called democracy. These included the mayor of Berlin ordering that public schools should no longer admit Jewish children in 1937. These include the Reich Ministry of the Interior, invalidating all German passports held by Jews until they were stamped with letter J in 1938. And these include the decree requiring Jews to turn in their gold, their silver, diamonds, and other valuables to the state in 1939. So let's be in no doubt whatsoever. Freedom can be eroded as much by our words and our laws as by violence and brute force. Words as a weapon are far more subtle an adversary to freedom and democracy than violence. And often they're given far more time to flourish at all levels of society. Words as weapons cause us all to lose trust in one another. Words as weapons make us feel more unsafe. Now, when we witness the prejudice that creeps in so pervasive in our society, once it becomes normalized, then each and every single one of us has an eternal choice to make, no matter what the point in history is. Do we act or do we look away? Well, I refuse to look away. And I know we are gathered here with many communities. Holocaust Memorial Day is always a diverse affair with many communities represented. But let me say to my friends in the Jewish community, I say friends because it's a community I grew up with. I was born in the area and part of Scotland with the largest Jewish community, the school with the largest Jewish population, a community that I've been very close to for the whole of my life, that we recognise in the government the growing threat of anti-Semitism, the fear that many in our Jewish communities feel. I just met with a group of Jewish students just a couple of weeks ago at my insistence to hear from them about their experiences on campus. Nobody should ever feel that they cannot be themselves. They cannot express their identity, cannot express who they are. And that fear is real amongst our Jewish community. So we have to work, and I commit the government to work with all partners, all political parties, all stakeholders, our police, our universities, of course the community itself, to tackle this threat. Unequivocally, we condemn any form of hatred, of course including anti-Semitism. And I was pleased that, notwithstanding the real challenges that we faced, that Olivia alluded to in terms of the ripple effects from the situation in Israel and Gaza, that we were able to join as faith leaders in October to express a very steadfast commitment against all forms of hate, bigotry, and xenophobia in a joint statement of solidarity. And we cannot allow what happens anywhere in the world to cause disunity amongst us, the Muslim and Jewish community, and of course I speak as a member of that community, the Muslim community. We've enjoyed friendship not for years, for decades. Children have played at each other's houses. You've come to our mosques, we've been to your synagogues. We've broken fast together. My goodness, how much more is there that unites us than divides us? I was always taught as a Muslim that Moses is mentioned, a revered prophet in Judaism, the most revered perhaps, mentioned more in the Quran than any other prophet of God, more than Muhammad is mentioned in the Quran. My goodness, how much unites us. And we must never ever forget that. We must never ever lose our empathy or our love for each other. The moment we do that, then we are lost. Each and every single one of us are lost. And that's why the stories of the Holocaust, for me, are so important. They must all give us the courage to act, to speak out, to invest in the unity of our precious communities. So let's take courage from the many heroic souls who stood up against Hitler's regime, which instructed the death of around 6 million Jews and many millions of other innocent who were deemed too dangerous, too inconvenient, or too inferior by the Nazis. In terms of that bravery, the UK National Archives holds the following dispatch from the Central Committee of the Jewish Labour Movement of Poland, dated 28th of April 1943, and let me quote directly from that dispatch. Today is the 9th day that the ghetto fights back. SS and Wehrmacht formations lay siege to the ghetto. Artillery and flamethrowers are employed. Aeroplanes shower high explosives and sedentary bombs on 40,000 Jews who still remain in the ghetto. The Germans mine and blast blocks of houses where the residents put up resistance. The ghetto is burning. Smoke covers the entire city of Warsaw. Men, women, and children who are not burnt alive are being murdered en masse. The Jews fight back furiously and have killed and wounded about 1,000 of the enemy. The Polish population marvel at the spirit of the Jewish defense. The reaction of the Germans is that of shame and of rage. On behalf of those fighting back, and all of us condemned to die, we call to the whole world. That call to the world didn't end in the Second World War. It still rings out today. And it's a reminder to each and every single one of us that when we see the horrors and brutality of violence unfolding, then as a world, as a humanity, as a human race, we can't afford to look away. The greatest danger I fear that we face is the assumption that democracy can never be enhanced, it can never be improved, it can never be made to be more inclusive, or somehow that democracy is impervious to prejudice. It's not. Freedom very much perishes in the desert of our own arrogance and apathy. Democracy dies in the chokehold of misinformation, of despotism, conspiracy, inhumanity. So therefore, we must be ever willing to be humbled by the past. That is the true importance, I believe, of Holocaust Memorial Day. We must always remember. Anita Lasker-Walfish, a musician, survivor of the Holocaust, survivor of Auschwitz and Bergen-Belsen concentration camps, never spoke to her children about why they had no grandparents. Until one day she made a photo album of forgotten memories, black and white family photographs of summer beach holidays from before the Second World War. And in the back of the album she wrote the following inscription: "Dear children, I have written and compiled this document with one thought in mind, namely that I'm dedicating it to you and to your children. We've never talked much about those dark days. At what point does one start explaining to one's child that there are people in the world who had as their ideology the total annihilation of Jews and other quote-unquote undesirables by murdering them in the most sophisticated manner," end quote. In interviews, Anita attributed one aspect of her survival to her assignment to the Auschwitz Women's Orchestra. She was made to play marches for the enslaved and to entertain the SS on Sundays. The last generation of Holocaust survivors still give us the gift, but also the warning of their precious stories, stories like Anita's. Stories for us to then retell. Holocaust Memorial Day not only remembers the survivors of the Holocaust, but as Anita has said, we'll also hear testimonies from those who are the survivors and who bore witness to the Bosnian and Rwandan genocides. So today I give thanks for the presence of Peter Lantos, Sabina Kadic-McKenzie, Petra Saric, and Chantal Marimi as well. We're here together today because despite where we may have differences, be they of opinion, be they of politics, we choose the light, we choose hope, we choose friendship, but most importantly, we rededicate ourselves to empathy and rededicate ourselves to love. And we stand in absolute defiance of hatred in all of its forms, anywhere in the world. We each of us have it within our power to increase the hopeful light of this world, or indeed, we have the choice to perpetuate darkness. It's our choice. Let us commit to always being restless in the pursuit of justice and human rights, of making the right choice, and of never, ever looking away. Thank you again, my dear friends, for inviting me to speak in this important act of remembrance with you. It is an enormous honour, and I look forward to hearing the testimony of our survivors. Let us endeavour to make sure those stories are told to our children, our grandchildren, and generations to come.
Thank you, First Minister, for your extremely powerful words. I just want to pick up on a few of his words that I hope we will all go away and reflect on once this event is over. The first word you said again and again was choices. We all have those choices to make. And the second word was friendship, which is such a powerful word, such a powerful feeling, and such a powerful action. And the third was your comment about how we all have more in common than that divides us. And I hope we can all reflect on those words after today. Thank you too, First Minister, for the care you show in marking Holocaust Memorial Day every year and the support that you give to all of us working in this field. We couldn't be more grateful. The Holocaust Memorial Day Trust is very lucky to work with some wonderful organisations across the UK and here in Scotland. And we value the close bonds between us and the next speakers from the Anne Frank Trust, ably led by their Scotland educator, Ailey Lean. I'm delighted to welcome two young Scottish Anne Frank Trust ambassadors, Enoch Akinola David from St Andrew's Secondary School and Yana Hijazi from West Calder High School. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Enoch Akinola David, and I'm one of Scotland's ambassadors. And I'm here to reflect on the fragility of freedom. But before I speak anymore, I want to explain what is freedom. Well, freedom means different things for people. But to me, it means having the choice to do what I want to do and not what someone else wants me to do. Many of us here are familiar with the story of Anne Frank and how it shows just how fragile freedom is. The fragility of Anne's freedom is shown on Saturday, the 20th of June, 1942. Anne wrote, "After May 1940, the good times were few and far between. First there was the war, then the capitulation, and then the arrival of the Germans, which is when the trouble started for the Jews. Our freedom was severely restricted by a series of anti-Jewish decrees." Thinking about this loss of freedom, I want to share a few lines from Robert Burns. He wrote, "Many and sharp the numerous ills, woven with our flame, more pointed still. We make ourselves regret, remorse, and shame. And man, whose heaven erected face, the smiles of love adorn, man's humanity to man, makes countless thousand mourn. Man was made to mourn, a dodge by Robert Burns, 1784. In conclusion, I would like to say a few words of my own. We are meant to live for those who have died to keep their memories alive. Enoch 2024. And now I'm going to pass on to Jenna. Thank you for listening.
Hello, good evening. I am going to say a small poem of mine called It's Crystal Clear. Freedom, it's almost like crystal, having a captivating intricacy when carefully cared for. The multitude of shapes, colors, and forms, each contributing to its unique beauty. Yet, with one wrong move, it can all break apart, leaving behind only fragments of what was once so perfect. Freedom, many take it for granted. They walk by without a backwards thought on what pleasures they have, oblivious to their freedom, oblivious to how blessed and fortunate they are, and ignorant in the embrace of their freedom. Freedom, it should be preserved. We cannot afford to be complacent. The freedom of movement, the freedom of religion, the freedom of speech, the freedom to live. I can go on and on and on, because freedom is not one singular note, but a chorus of sound, each clamoring to be heard in society. But, like crystal, freedom is fragile, it is delicate. Humanity constantly stands at the breaking point between privilege and responsibility. The fragility of freedom should not scare us, but fill us with a sense of accountability. Each step we take, each word we speak, should be a promise to protect the delicate beauty of freedom, because we must not forget the cries of history. Thank you.
Thank you, Enoch and Jana. My goodness, what thoughtful words and such eloquence. That's really inspiring for all of us. Thank you, both of you. Friends, our next speaker is the extraordinary Professor Peter Lantos BEM, a Holocaust survivor and a distinguished author. Born in Hungary, at the age of 5, Peter was deported with his parents to Bergen-Belsen concentration camp. After the Holocaust, Peter arrived in London and embarked on a remarkable medical career that spanned over 3 decades. During this time, he made significant contributions to our understanding of diseases of the nervous system. My friends, it's a real privilege for us all to hear from a Holocaust survivor and to hear from Peter. And it's a privilege that none of us take for granted, Peter. Thank you for joining us.
I don't think that after this I will live up to the expectation. First Minister of Scotland, members of the Scottish Parliament, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, thank you for inviting me. The only reason to be here is that as a child of 5, I was prisoner 8,431 in Bergen-Belsen concentration camp. I was deported there with my parents in the summer of 1944 from a small Hungarian town. My father died there of starvation. My mother and I survived. When we returned to Hungary, we realized that 21 members of my family perished in the Holocaust. My informal talk today has 3 parts. First, I wish to share with you our journey from Hungary to Belsen and back. The second, briefly talk about the aftermath, living under a communist dictatorship. And finally, in the third part, through a single heroic example, bring together Scotland and Hungary against the backdrop of the Holocaust. In 1941, Hungary entered the war on the side of Nazi Germany. By the beginning of 1944, the extreme right-wing government of Hungary realized that the Germans are losing a war, and to prevent Hungary to have separate negotiations with the Allies, Hungary was invaded on the 19th of March 1944 by Germany. And this sealed the fate of the Hungarian Jewry, the last to be exterminated in Europe. Adolf Eichmann, the mastermind of the Holocaust, arrived in Budapest on the same day, and the full collaboration of the Hungarian authorities, the deportation of the Hungarian Jews took place. This, the last chapter of Holocaust, the murder of the final solution, was the most successful in the history, in that in 3 months in the summer of 1944, 450,000 Jews were gassed, mainly in Auschwitz-Birkenau. The effect of the German invasion on our everyday life was imminent. Jews had lost their job and businesses, couldn't take part in public life, had to surrender their cars, bicycles, and radios, were allowed to go to the market at prescribed times, and everybody over the age of 6 had to wear the Star of David on their outer garments. In May, 1 month later, we had to leave our home and go to the ghetto. Born in 1939, I was not quite 5, and of course, I didn't understand what was happening. By June, we had to leave the town in which we lived, transferred in cattle wagons to a larger city, which was one of the provincial collection centers for the deportation of the Jews. During the last days of June, 3 trains, roughly each having 2,500 Jews, left that city. We were, my father, mother, grandmother, and I, we were allocated to train number 2. Other members of the family were allocated to train number 1. Train number 1 arrived in Auschwitz, and they were gassed immediately, including my cousin of 5. We on train number 2 were lucky. Had I traveled on train number 5, I wouldn't be here today to tell this story. These were the transport consisted of cattle wagons. Each had roughly 70, 90 people. Of course, we couldn't lie down. We couldn't sit down. Food was hardly present, and hygiene was non-existent. After a never-ending journey, we arrived, because we were lucky, a place, Wiener Neustadt, outside Vienna, roughly 30 miles south. And my parents were used as slave laborers. Why? By the summer of 1944, the Red Army was liberating the eastern part of Europe, Ukraine, Belarus, part of Poland, and the source of slave labor stopped. So the second best, they used surviving Jews. My parents were engaged by a small building firm, and we lived on the premises of this firm. They actually had to repair roads. Wiener Neustadt, the city where we were, was strategic importance. It had a large Messerschmitt factory, which obviously produced military planes, and they were bombed very often by the Allies. I met other child because every morning an open track took us to the building site where my mother and father repaired the road with hundreds of other people. And that we had for from the end of July until November. That was relatively a better part of our journey. At the end of November, we were put yet another cattle wagon train, and we traveled again endlessly, no one knew where. It was even worse than the first journey, because by that time it was winter and bitterly cold. After a long journey, we arrived at a small station, Bergen, and there we were marched to a large concentration camp. The camp was surrounded, as we learned later, by electrified barbed wires with regular watchtowers, and these were manned by SS guards. What happened? That was Bergen-Belsen. It was here that I became 8,431 prisoner. The date was 7th of December 1944. I found the precise date in the archives 60 years later. I don't wish to describe the horrors of the camp. Perhaps you all know quite a great deal about it. As a child, I remember the physical hardship, the constant hunger, the freezing cold, the excruciating boredom of standing for hours in ice-cold wind to be counted and recounted for hours because the numbers never agreed. Apart from the starvation, the death and the disease. By that time, the number of people in Belsen swelled to well over 50,000. The camp was originally designed for 500-600. And then epidemics started: typhus, typhoid fever, dysentery, starvation, and tuberculosis. This is why Bergen-Belsen became hell on earth, because people died by the hundreds. When the British Army liberated Bergen-Belsen on the 15th of April 1945, they found thousands of unburied dead and many thousand dying, including my father, who died in March 13th in 1945. However, my mother and I were not liberated by the British. The Germans, for reasons which are not quite known up till today, again had 3 trains of prisoners with the intention to transfer us to Prague. One train arrived in a concentration camp outside Prague. Another train was liberated by the Red Army, and our train was liberated by the American. On 13th of April 1945, outside a small village, Farsleben, in eastern Germany. We were under American support and help, and for a short time the British took over, and finally the war had ended by that time, became the Soviet zone of occupation. The Russians were helpful but not well organized. They didn't organize a train to take us back to Hungary. And my mother was desperate to get back, to find other members of her family, and also I had a brother, 14 years of my senior, who had been taken for hard labor before we had been deported. So when the train didn't materialize, my mother, who was quite enterprising, decided one day to escape, and through Prague and Budapest, we arrived back to Hungary. It was not a happy homecoming. Our family house was deserted of both of its content and lives. 21 members of family perished in the Holocaust. My brother, who returned from hard labor, died of typhoid fever a couple of weeks before we arrived home. He was 20. It took a long time for me to realize that not only our family or our city, but Hungary and also Europe lost so many Jews. Just to give an example of Hungary, in 1941, including converts, 825,000 Jews lived in Hungary, of whom 569,000 were murdered. After 3 relatively prosperous years, Hungary became, like most other Eastern European and Central European countries, a one-party communist dictatorship where life was as bad or as unreal as George Orwell described in 1984. My childhood experiences were a great deal to decide me to become a doctor. I thought I should have a profession in which I could help my fellow human being. As a junior doctor, I was very fortunate because I got a Wellcome Research Fellowship with which I could come to London, and I arrived here in 1968. When my grant expired after 1 year, I decided to stay in this country. So I was regarded as a defector. It was still Cold War. And as a result, I was sentenced, fortunately in my absence, in Hungary, for 16 months in prison and complete confiscation of all my belongings. I had my postgraduate training here in London, received a PhD on brain tumors, and 10 years after my arrival, I was appointed to a chair of neuropathology, which Olivia referred to, a branch of clinical neuroscience at the Institute of Psychiatry, Maudsley, in London. Apart from research, I was lead clinician for the NHS, responsible for diagnostic service covering a catchment area of London and part of Kent of 3.4 million people. After retirement, I decided to recollect my childhood memories of Belsen. It was quite important for me to remember. The problem was that being a child, 5, 6, remembered very little. So I decided, and I embarked on a journey to cover exactly the same places we had been 60 years earlier. So I went back all the places, and as a result, I had a great deal of material, and it resulted in 2 books, one for adults, Parallel Lines, A Journey from Childhood to Belsen, and another one published last year, The Boy Who Didn't Want to Die. Finally, I would like, as a conclusion, to bring, which is seemingly disparate, Hungary and Scotland together through a single person against the backdrop of the Holocaust. We have to go back, I'm afraid, for a very short time to the 19th century. The Scottish Presbyterian Church established a mission in Budapest in 1841, and a school 2 years later in 1843. During the following decades, it became a center of excellence, one of the best, if not the best, of girls' school, which tells you a great deal about Scottish education in the 19th century. The school had both Christian and Jewish students, and the basic principle was to educate them together, to enable them to learn about each other's religions. In 1932, a certain Jane Haining, born in outside a small village of Dunscore, was appointed matron of the girls' school home of the school. From the beginning, Jane established herself as an eminently capable, competent, reliable, and enthusiastic member of staff, equally loved by colleagues, students, and their parents. She devoted her life to her girls, perhaps at the expense of her private life. After written declaration of war on Hungary in 1941, Jane was asked and later ordered by her superior and the British legation to leave since she was in danger. However, against all the advice, she decided to stay. If the student needed her in the sunshine, she said, they certainly would need her in time of darkness. On trumped-up charges of spying, 2 Gestapo officers found her guilty in a mock trial. On the 12th of May, 1944, she was driven from prison to the railway station and forced with many Hungarian Jews into cattle trucks. Her train arrived in Auschwitz. concentration camp, and she became 79,467 prisoner. After several weeks of hard labor, she was gassed on the 17th of July, 1944. Today, Jane Henning is acknowledged as a martyr both of Hungary and Scotland, and was accorded the highest honor of being righteous among the nations by Yad Vashem Holocaust Memorial in Jerusalem. Today, we have assembled to remember the Holocaust. Perhaps it is an occasion when we should quote the survivor of Auschwitz, Primo Levi. The Holocaust is a page from the book of humanity, from which we should never remove the bookmark of memory.
Peter, you are a remarkable man, and we are all very honoured and privileged to have heard you today. I don't think any of us will go out of the Scottish Parliament this evening without that image in our heads of a small boy under excruciating boredom, extreme hunger and fear and cold, and to think also of the many contributions you have made to British society, but you have also broadened it so that we will all go out inspired too, not only by what you have achieved, but also that Scottish heroine, I don't use that word lightly, Jane Henning. Thank you. After the Holocaust, we all know that the world said never again. It's a particularly hollow phrase when we think of how humanity has failed to learn those lessons, and how the processes that Peter and the First Minister described of othering others, dehumanizing them, separating, all those processes have been followed again in genocides that took place since the Holocaust in Cambodia, Rwanda, Bosnia and Darfur. In July 1995, against the backdrop of an ongoing civil war, Bosnian Serb forces murdered around 8,000 Muslim men and boys in the town of Srebrenica. Petra Saric is a third-year pupil at Dice Academy and Aberdeen City Music School. In 1992, Petra's parents left Banja Luka in Bosnia, arrived in Scotland, and have made Aberdeen their home for the last 30 years. Petra will play a piece of Chopin for us now, which will be followed by the reading of the Srebrenica Prayer in both English and Bosnian by Sabina Kadic-Mackenzie and Hannah J. Eric, trustees of Remembering Srebrenica Scotland. Thank you.
U ime Boga, milostvog, samilosnog.
In the name of God, the most merciful and compassionate,
Molimo te, Bože, svemogući.
we pray to Almighty God.
Neka tuga postane nada,
May grievance become hope.
neka osveta bude pravda.
May revenge become justice.
Neka majčina suza bude molitva,
May mother's tears become prayers.
da se nikome nikad ne ponovi Srebrenica.
That Srebrenica never happens again to no one and nowhere.
Thank you so much, Petra. That was the most beautiful and emotional playing. We're all so grateful to you. And to Sabina and Hannah, thank you for that beautiful prayer. We're delighted that we have been working with you and your colleagues in remembering Srebrenica. Thank you for all the wonderful work that you do, not only for the contribution today. Thank you. As we all gather here today, we've talked about how we as leaders can play our part in making some positive choices. But of course, in years to come, it's going to be the young people who will be carrying forward the legacy of what we have heard today. And it's always so encouraging and even inspirational for us to hear from young people such as the ones we've already heard of from the Anne Frank Trust, but also now I'm delighted to welcome Holocaust Educational Trust ambassadors Ian Duguid and Croydon Martins from Northfield Academy to share their reflections this Holocaust Memorial Day.
My name is Croydon Martins and this is Ian Duguid and we're ambassadors for the Holocaust Educational Trust. We took part in the Trust Lessons from Auschwitz project as students from Northfield Academy in Aberdeen earlier this year. As part of the project, we heard from a Holocaust survivor, took part in a one-day visit to former Nazi concentration death camp Auschwitz-Birkenau, and upon our return shared what we've learnt with our community. I wanted to take part in this project to develop my knowledge and understanding of the Holocaust and to share what I've learnt with others. Learning about the Holocaust is important to me because we need to remember the past and learn about the tragic history of the Holocaust in order to create a better future. We must realise that the Nazis aimed not just to murder all of the Jews, but to erase their history and culture and make sure that they were forgotten. Therefore, we must focus on how we can remember those who were murdered today. Seeing the site of Auschwitz-Birkenau for ourselves was different from hearing or reading about the Holocaust because we were able to see the extent of dehumanization that took place there. It was sad seeing the belongings from victims, as each individual belonging had a story behind it linked to each individual person. A particular moment that stuck with me was learning about the Book of Names, which contains 4 million names of the 6 million Jews who were murdered during the Holocaust. Many names are missing as no one who remembered them survived, which is devastating to me as those who have suffered should at least be remembered. We're also privileged to hear from Holocaust survivor Janine Weber, BEM, and she taught us that not all stories end up in Auschwitz. However, each unique story is just as important. I believe it is important for young people to have the opportunity to hear the testimony of Holocaust survivors in order to be properly educated about the negative impacts of the Holocaust and to spread what we have learned to others. Although survivors won't be able to share their stories forever, we as young people are committed to the responsibility of ensuring that these experiences live on by sharing those stories. Thank you.
Our project was a fairly simple one. It was to bring Holocaust remembrance to the forefront of people's minds and to let them understand the causes of one of the worst genocides in human history. Moreover, we wanted to bring awareness to the steps and events that led to such a grotesque example of human behaviour. In order to successfully achieve our goals, we have given talks about our visit to Auschwitz to the teachers of our school and encouraged them to reflect on the horror and cruelty of anti-Semitism with their classes. With the help of Croydon, we are in the process of publishing an article in our local newspaper, Press and Journal. In that article, we're hoping to achieve a wider scale of awareness outside of our school. I also received the brilliant opportunity to speak at an Aberdeen Holocaust Memorial event where I conveyed the same message last Friday. We hope that the impact of this project is increased awareness, especially in such precarious and dangerous times for the Jewish people of Britain and of the world. We wish to remind people in our communities where casual anti-Semitism can lead. Anti-Semitic behaviour and neo-Nazis have no place in a modern, decent society, and the prevention of a rise in such beliefs is the duty of all individuals. Education is the most important method of defeating all kinds of prejudicial behaviour, and it is our duty as young people to deliver it by sharing our experiences and remembering the Holocaust. This reminds me, as mentioned before, of the truly extraordinary opportunity that we got to meet Janine Weber, a remarkable woman of incredible resilience. Her entire story is simply fascinating, but the bit that stuck with me was her memories of being told, and I'm sorry about this, about her brother being buried alive in the Lvov ghetto, by Nazi officers, of course. As gruesome and as horrifying as that is, these are the stories we must tell in an order of understanding that if we remain lazy in tackling anti-Semitic behaviour and beliefs, there is nothing in the way of it happening again. It is this thought alone that inspires me to continue to work with the Holocaust Education Trust in my future as an ambassador. Now, I would like to end this by pointing out a very simple historical fact that relates to the theme of today's Holocaust Memorial Day about fragility of freedom, the luxury we have that is freedom. Weimar Germany was free, it was democratic, it was fairly inclusive for the time, but this was, of course, until anti-Semitic behaviour and beliefs managed to seep into the core of society and fool reasonably minded people that not only was the Holocaust moral, but that it was necessary. Thank you so much for inviting us to be here today to share our experience and reflections on why Holocaust education is important for young people. Thank you very much.
Croydon, thank you so much for sharing with us all your very thoughtful reflections on your trip, and Ian, for impressing us enormously with the work that you have both done since going on your Lessons from Auschwitz trip. Thank you to the leaders and our friends at our sister organisation, the Holocaust Educational Trust, for the work that they do in supporting and encouraging you and other young people like yourselves to do such impressive work. My friends, I think, having listened to Ian and Croydon and Enoch and Jana earlier on, we can be reassured that the future is in safe hands. This year, we are marking the 30th anniversary of the genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda. In 100 days, in 1994, approximately 1 million Tutsis and moderate Hutus were murdered. The genocide took place following decades of tensions and restrictions on freedoms between Hutus and Tutsis, and a recent history of persecution and discrimination against Tutsis. It's my great privilege now to introduce Chantal Marimi, who moved to Scotland as a Rwandan refugee in 1999. Since then, she has become an active citizen who is often described as the stalwart of her community in Fife and an advocate of human rights, particularly the right to access education for girls and young women in Rwanda. In 2018, she was awarded the title Scottish Woman of the Year by Creative Oceanic for her philanthropic work and public speaking. Chantal published her autobiography, The Journey of My Life in Rwanda, in 2007, and we're delighted that she will be sharing with us one of her remarkable poems entitled Silent Bones.
Thank you very much for the privilege to share one of my poems, Silent Bones. Your silent bones speak. They talk of cruelty you had to endure. They remind us of man's ability to butcher another human being because of where they are born, and because of who they are. In the dust of the planets that now carry us, your remains shout. Songs of old times echo, and the drums across the hills beat, telling us of your suffering, telling us of the cruelty you had to endure. As darkness descended upon my country, the beautiful country of 1,000 hills, where rivers flowed, blood now flowed, across villages and towns and cities, evil and its legions reigned, minds that are drunk from the cups of hatred, eyes filled with evil, and the determination to exterminate. Suddenly, a nation that speaks one language, share one culture, turned into an abattoir. And the manners in which you were killed still shock today as if it was yesterday. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I did not see this coming. I am sorry. I'm sorry I stood by and watched you butchered. And I did not do anything. I'm sorry I kept quiet when you were being chopped to pieces. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I looked the other way as machetes chopped you into 1,000 pieces. I am sorry. I'm sorry that your loved ones are having to pick up those pieces today. However, I promise to honor your memory. I promise to always raise awareness of what happened to you. I promise to speak up against hate crime and to never forget you. I promise. I promise to always fight for justice by using the tools of reason and logic to defend, to protect, and dignify those in need, especially those who have survived you. I promise. I promise to teach current and future generations the values and the principles of Ubuntu. I promise to teach those values so that current and future generations can learn to preserve human life and not destroy it. One more promise, just one. I promise to always seek ways in which we can all work together to take care of your loved ones. Tuzahora tubibuka. Thank you.
Chantal, thank you for keeping your promise with all of us today. You have kept your promise to raise awareness with all of us. You have kept your promise to honor the memory with all of us, and we will keep that promise with you. Thank you. My friends, for Holocaust Memorial Day this year, we encouraged people to light the darkness. Buildings, statues, structures lit up in purple here in Scotland, and the nation lit candles on Holocaust Memorial Day in an act of commemoration and reflection. I invite you all now to stand and join me in a moment of commemoration for a minute's silence to remember all those who were murdered in the Holocaust, under Nazi persecution of other communities, and in the genocide since in Cambodia, Rwanda, Bosnia, and Darfur. If you are able to and would like to, please stand. Thank you. For a minute's silence. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I would now like to invite Rabbi Rubin, Senior Orthodox Rabbi of Scotland, to share a few words with us and a prayer. Thank you.
I've been part of a National Holocaust Memorial Day events since 2001, when the 27th of January became a national dedicated day of remembrance for the victims of the Holocaust and the other genocides since the Holocaust. Each time I hear speakers say, and I've said it myself, never again. But sadly, it does happen over and over and over again. Somehow, despite this cry, despite the plea of never again, the evil ideology of genocide is tolerated, allowing it to perpetrate profound evil in the name of that ideology. Despite the cry of never again, it is still possible for intelligent and educated people to be persuaded to justify this evil. As I stand here today in 2024, 80 years after my grandfather's first wife and children perished in the Holocaust, I ask myself, could it happen again? And I am scared of the answer. In the past few months, a tune of a prayer has become popular once again in many Jewish communities in Israel and around the world because of the message of the prayer and the story behind the tune. The prayer was popular during the dark years of the Holocaust, and it is called Ani Mamin, I believe. It is a prayer of hope, a prayer of a belief that one day there will be peace amongst all people. A prayer that one day all people will find space in their hearts for one another. A prayer that the day will come when every person, no matter their religion, their color, or gender, is able to walk down any street anywhere in the world and feel the smile and love of those around them. What is special about the tune used to sing this prayer? A tune I sang here in Parliament in the past is that it was composed by Azriel Fastag in a cattle car packed with hundreds of Jews being taken to Treblinka death camp, where they were murdered for being different, for being other, for being Jewish. 2 young teenagers who miraculously survived that death ride taught us the tune. And I'll sing it here today to give me much needed hope and ask you to pray with me for the beautiful, peaceful world we crave for. Ani Mamin, Ani Mamin, Ani Mamin, Be'emuna Shelema, Be'viyas HaMoshiach, Bevias HaMoshiach, Ani Ma'amin. Bevias HaMoshiach, Bevias HaMoshiach, Ani Ma'amin.
Thank you, Rabbi Rubin. That was absolutely beautiful, and don't we all need to create hope in these days? Thank you. We're nearing the end of this evening's commemoration, and I'd like to pay a personal thanks to the Scottish Government for all the support they have offered, not only this year, but previous years as well. We're delighted to have such strong partners in our efforts to learn from genocide for a better future. And on that note, I'd like to welcome the Minister for Victims and Community Safety, Siobhan Brown, MSP, to give her address. Thank you.
Good evening. It is a complete honour to join you this evening to commemorate the Holocaust Memorial Day. Tonight we pay tribute to all those that we lost, and we stand together to remember the millions who suffered during the course of the Holocaust and the genocides which followed in Cambodia, Rwanda, Bosnia and Darfur. I'd like to express my deepest thanks to the organisers of the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust, and in particular Kirsty, for their tireless efforts in bringing us together for such an important commemoration. Last week, I attended the Holocaust Memorial Day parliamentary debate and spoke about this year's theme on the fragility of freedom. The Holocaust and genocide gave rise to some of the most heinous crimes in human history. Yet these atrocities began with regimes eroding the basic liberties of those that they simply viewed as different from themselves. In Nazi Germany, anti-Semitic legislation initially restricted the rights of Jewish citizens while also sowing the seeds of the devastating genocidal policies which would later follow. In Rwanda, freedom of movement was curtailed and cultured an environment where the Tutsi people were murdered indiscriminately. And in Bosnia, Muslim citizens were singled out and forced into concentration camps, while the town of Srebrenica witnessed the systemic massacre of 8,000 Bosniaks. The fragility of freedom is a particularly poignant message, and even more so given the challenges that we continue to face today. I'd like to therefore take a moment to commend the exceptional bravery of Peter, Sabina and Chantel, who have shared with us in a variety of moving ways the tragic impact genocide has on ordinary lives. I'd also like to thank Petra for her very moving musical contribution. All these remarkable contributions this evening must serve as an inspiration for us all to stand shoulder to shoulder and resolute in opposing all forms of prejudice. We must remain committed to educating our younger generations about the dangers of divisive narratives and helping them resist the voices of hatred. Only in doing so can we ensure that the terrible events of the past are never repeated. It is therefore greatly encouraging to hear the reflections given by the young people from St Andrew's Roman Catholic Secondary School, West Calder High School and Northfield Academy, and their experiences of working with the Holocaust Education Trust and the Anne Frank Trust. Their heartfelt words and compassion for such important causes gives me sincere hope that together we can create a kinder and a fairer world. It has been a privilege to be able to speak with you this evening, and I again would like to offer my sincerest gratitude to the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust and everyone else who has contributed to making this such a special occasion. Tonight demonstrates how vital it is that we continue to commemorate the millions who lost their lives to the Holocaust and to genocide. And as we reflect for a final time on fragility of freedom, It is paramount we take every measure possible to preserve this fundamental right for all of humanity and build a society where everyone can flourish while living free from hatred and fear. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Siobhan. An event like this couldn't take place without sterling work from a collaboration, and we've been lucky to work with some wonderful sister organisations. And chivying us all and keeping us all in line has been Kirsty Robson. Kirsty, thank you from me for your hard work and dedication. So I'd like to hand over to Kirsty for the final words.
Thank you, Olivia. It has been a huge honour for us to hold the national ceremony here in Parliament this evening. First Minister, Minister for Victims and Community Safety, Presiding Officer, MSPs, thank you for joining us, and to all of you for coming. We appreciate it. I'd like to echo Olivia and extend our thanks again to the Scottish Government for their support, which has allowed us to significantly expand our reach in Scotland, which is incredibly important. Also, would like to thank our lovely event sponsor this evening, Paul O'Kane, MSP. His commitment to ensuring HMD is commemorated and marked goes long beyond his time in Parliament, as I well know, and I'm very grateful. I'd like to thank all members who engaged with the debate this week and engaged in HMD at all. If you wore a badge, lit the darkness, took part in the debate, or marked in your constituencies, we are so very grateful. I'd also like to thank our participants this evening, starting with Peter, Chantal, and Rabbi Rubin, the First Minister and the Minister. It's always fantastic to see young people taking part in HMD, so thank you to Enoch, Jana, Petra, Ian and Croydon. You all contributed in such incredibly meaningful ways. Lastly, our heartfelt thanks go to our wonderful Scotland Steering Committee who have worked tirelessly to help today's event run incredibly smoothly. I'd like to highlight the incredible work and contributions done by our friends at Remembering Srebrenica Scotland. Thank you, Sabina and Hannah. The Anne Frank Trust, Ailey, has been pivotal to what we've been doing today. The Rwandan community in Scotland, Vision School Scotland, the Scottish Council of Jewish Communities and Interfaith Scotland. We're so incredibly grateful for your wisdom and your guidance. It is the fundamental belief of HMDT that we must learn the lessons from the past to create a safer and better future. We must all make the decisions to challenge prejudice, stand up to hatred and speak out against persecution. We all have a responsibility to protect the freedoms that we hold so dear. Thank you for coming to this unique and wonderful event tonight in the Scottish Parliament. Your presence has shown we will not let the memory of the Holocaust and more recent genocides fade. Rather, we will work towards a safer future. Thank you very much, and I'd like to hand back to our wonderful event sponsor, Paul O'Kane, MSP, to close tonight's proceedings. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Kirsty, and can I add my own thanks to Kirsty? She alluded to it in her remarks, but I've known Kirsty since she was at Barhead High School, and I was the convener for education and equalities in East Renfrewshire. And Kirsty actually did very similar to what the young people who spoke this evening did and went to Auschwitz and learned and came back and shared that knowledge, and now carries forward that torch by working for the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust. So I think it shows that journey, but indeed I think the young people here this evening show that that journey continues and that it's incumbent upon every generation to stand up and to remember and to educate as we have done this evening. So really just for me to say thank you once again to everyone for your attendance at this event this evening. It has been wonderful for us as parliamentarians to host you in the Scottish Parliament and to share this time together with people from across Scotland. And I think the message coming out of tonight, as with any commemoration of Holocaust Memorial Day, is that we move forward now with renewed hope, with renewed courage to go out and to stand up, to speak out, and to carry forward throughout the year our commemoration and our advocacy for a better world. And whether you are up the stairs behind me in the chamber of the Scottish Parliament or whether you're going about your everyday business in your communities, I hope that everyone will take that message forward tonight. So thank you once again. And just to say that we are now kind of up until about 8 o'clock, the events team will start to direct people. So there is a time to be able to say hello to one another and to chat, but the events team are always very keen to make sure that we keep things moving. So if I don't say that, I will fall foul of them in the future, and I do want to host more events in this Parliament. So thank you once again, and we will see you soon. Have a safe journey home.